Now let's continue with the second meaning of real GDP. Real GDP can also be inflation-adjusted GDP. And this is needed in order to compare GDP over time. For example, when comparing Thailand's GDP in the year 2013 with Thailand's GDP in the year 2014. When we use the nominal GDP in order to compare GDP over time, the problem is that nominal GDP is influenced by the effect of price inflation. Price inflation is basically price change. So prices always change, even within a country. You have probably noticed that in your life, that sometimes things that you would buy at 7-Eleven are more expensive than 1 year ago. And this is called price inflation. Prices change over time. And the problem with that is that we cannot easily compare the production in 1 year with the production in another year, because prices in 2 years are very likely to be different. And real GDP in that situation can be used to measure the true growth of GDP by adjusting for the effects of this price inflation. Let's look at a small example again. This time we're looking at the production of cars in Thailand. We have 2 years, year 1 and year 2. Let's assume that in year 1, Thailand produced 10 cars. It's just a simple and easy example. In year 2, Thailand produced 12 cars. So Thailand in year 2 produced 2 cars more than in year 1. Nominal GDP is calculated by multiplying the number of cars, or more general, the number of goods produced in Thailand by the current price in the same year. So for example, let's assume that the price for one car produced in Thailand in year 1 was $1,000. So if you wanted to buy a car in Thailand in year 1, you would need to pay $1,000. Let's further assume that in year 2, this price increased. So in year 2, the price of one car in Thailand was higher. If you wanted to buy a car, the same car in Thailand in year 2, you would have to pay $1,100. And this is something that you can observe in your real life, right? Prices for cars are getting higher. The same car, the same type of car is more expensive this year than it was last year. This is what we call inflation. Now, what effect does that price change has on the nominal GDP? In year 1, the nominal GDP is $10,000. 10 multiplied by 1,000. In year 2, the nominal GDP is 13,200. This is 12 multiplied by 1,100. So it's correct that the nominal GDP in year 2 is higher than the nominal GDP in year 1, because there were more cars produced than in year 1. But the difference between these two numbers is a little bit too large. And that is because of the price effect that also affects the difference in nominal GDP between the 2 years. Actually, the nominal GDP in year 2 is slightly overestimated. So it's a little bit too large. And that is to use the price for one car in year 1 for calculating nominal GDP in both years. So for year 1 we use $1,000, and also for year 2 we use $1,000. What is the effect of that on nominal GDP? I'm sorry, on real GDP, because now we are calculating real GDP because we have adjusted this inflation. In our calculation there is no price effect anymore because the price is constant over time. When we calculate the real GDP using these constant prices, we get the following numbers. Year 1 is the same, $10,000, because we are using the same price, $1,000. But for year 2, we have a slightly different number. Now real GDP is $12,000. Remember that nominal GDP was $13,200. That is because the price that we are now using in year 2 is lower than it was before. And the difference between 10,000 and 12,000 actually reflects very well the difference in production between 10 and 12 cars between these 2 years. So comparing real GDP over time is much better than comparing nominal GDP over time. Let's shortly repeat what we have learned in this presentation. GDP measures the total market value of all final goods and services produced in a country in a single year. GDP per capita is a better indicator for a country's level of development than GDP because it takes into account population size. Real GDP, or real GDP per capita, is a better indicator for a country's level of development than nominal GDP, or nominal GDP per capita, because it takes into account differences in prices between countries or differences in prices between years. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation. If you feel that you did not understand something, please go back and watch the presentation again. Thank you and see you next time.